Hi, Rob B here with Rob D, and this is the Property Podcast. And this week, we're looking at the UK property boom that you don't know about. I promise you, this is an important episode and you need to know what's happening.
Yep, I hear what the more sceptical among you are saying. You're thinking, Rob and Rob, another clickbaity title, trying to tempt me to listen to your podcast rather than something else. What property boom? What are you talking about? Well, we are not in the business of making big claims based on not much. Well, not normally anyway. This is important. And I think this is a really important episode because we're going to be talking about something that is happening, and chances are you won't know about it. If you've been reading the papers, you might see the odd stat related to what's going on, but it won't tell you why, and it won't tell you what the consequences of it are. This is the kind of thing that you only find out when you're in a lucky enough position to be doing this stuff every day, talking to lots of different people, and being able to filter out a lot of the noise and put the pieces together from what you're really seeing, combining that with some of the stats that you see, putting it all together and figuring out, wow, this is a thing. That is what we're going to be talking about today. And that's why if you want to know about property and what's happening and what's going to happen, you should not be reading the papers. You should be listening to the Property Podcast. So well done for being here. Big claims for this episode, but I really do think it's going to be a good one. Before we get into the topic proper, we've got a news story that both touches on this topic and also proves us right at the same time. I think this is about the third time we've done this now, but when we get something right, we really do need to milk it. Rob, the Home Track report, latest one came out just today as we're recording, and the story I picked out is from The Telegraph. The headline is House Price Growth Hits 12-Year High in Some Northern Cities as London Slows to 5-Year Low.
Yeah, London now is in the bottom 5 performing cities. Bottom 5. Who would have thought that? You know, even a year ago, who would have thought that? Oh, we did say it. But other than podcast listeners, who would have thought that? But there we go. London is now in the bottom 5. And lo and behold, number 1, Manchester. So you can see trends happening. And this is a prime example of what Rob's talking about. A piece of data on its own isn't very useful. But if you put it together and use the knowledge you've hopefully attained by the podcast, that news story won't be a shock to you whatsoever. Poor old Aberdeen, and that's always one that gets my attention because it's a unique market. Down by over 8% year on year now. Aberdeen is an area we're going to look at in the Property Hub magazine. So check that out. Go to propertyhub.net/magazine. It's not been done yet, but it'll be in the next one or two because it's a really interesting city because it's such a unique property market. But the main story is London. The trend is down. It's dropping every single month. Let's see how low it goes. And Manchester, getting stronger.
Yeah, when people always say, well, you know, up north, all well and good, but I want capital growth, so I'm going to buy in London. No, that's not automatically how it works. It's not how it's working at the moment, that's for sure. The gap is getting narrower. Okay, well, that does lead us on, Rob, nicely to our topic this week, the UK property boom that you don't know about. So what we're seeing here seems to be a little bit of history repeating itself.
It is. So let's go back. So 2008, we had a crash. And after that crash, everyone was very fearful, and understandably so. And lots of things happened. Interest rates fell, but also the pound collapsed. The pound was quite strong leading up to the crash, but afterwards, it crashed. What does that mean? Why is that relevant? Why are we talking about it? Well, when the pound crashes, for us, it means it's more expensive to go overseas. But for people overseas, it's a lot cheaper to come here, but it's also a lot cheaper to buy here. So property prices dropped. London dropped about 20%. Most people don't remember that. But London quickly dropped 20%. It was actually one of the biggest fallers if you look at the data. Go and look for yourself. And the pound collapsed as well. So not only London, for example, went 20% cheaper, but also it was a similar number cheaper as well because of the pound collapsing, another 20%. So to overseas investors, London was the sale of a century, one of the most important capital cities in the world, on a double sale, a currency sale and a property sale. So they started to pile in, and they piled in big time. And they've been doing that ever since. But for the first 2 or 3 years, the UK buyers, investors, were still scared. Oh, we've had a crash. We're going to stay away from property. London quickly recovered back to levels of 2008, then beyond. And it kept pushing, but it wasn't being driven by UK buyers. It was being driven by overseas investors. Now that was then, but what about now? We've had a repeat. The pound has weakened again. Interest rates are still low. And property prices in the north, up until very, very recently, hadn't moved. So overseas investors who feel like London's hit its highs, and the data we just talked about reflects that, so you can understand why, are looking to other major cities in the UK and saying, okay, well, where else can I invest that offers loads of value but is still on sale because of the currency? And that's what's playing out now. And we're seeing it in northern towns and cities.
Yeah, what does it look like when this happens? Well, the Manchester Evening News has got a story. It's called What a Year of Trying to Buy a Flat in Manchester City Centre Taught Me. I'll read out a bit of it now so you don't have to go to the Manchester Evening News website, which is awful. And you might find that this sounds a bit familiar if you were had anything to do with the London property market the last time around. So the quote is this. We'd put interest in for around 10 properties and still couldn't even get a viewing. It began to get really stressful, so we left it for a couple of months. We managed to put several bids in only to see us outbid by cash buyers. There are a lot of investors coming in and buying them. You can't just compete with that because for the vendor, it's great. So that was the quote. Then the story goes on to say, those were just the lucky ones where he was able to put a bid in. There were many more where he didn't even manage to make it through the door. After almost 10 months of searching and making no progress, Bryn, that's the guy in question, decided that the only way to stand a chance of even getting a viewing was to go in blind and make an offer without seeing the flat first. Now that sounds so much like London in 2006. It's unbelievable. I was buying a flat in London at that point, and that's exactly what it was like. But it wasn't London in 2006. That's Manchester in 2016.
Yep, and that's what owner-occupiers are going through right now. But why? There's reasons behind this, and that's what we're going to dig into. So that was then when we look back at '08 in London, but this is now, and we're going to look at what's causing it now. We're going to go into more detail. So as we said, it's happened in London, and now it's happening in the north. But where exactly, Rob? Where is this focus? We've kind of given the game away already, but where's it happening?
Well, yeah, it is Manchester that we're talking about. Manchester is the one that's topping all the tables when it comes to price growth. It's where all the attention is. And in our community, Manchester is the number one place that you hear people talking about. Our audience, of course, is not typical of the general investor in the UK. Most investors or wannabe investors in the UK, it's probably not on their radar at all. But Manchester is the one that's driving everything. But of course, it's not the only place. Manchester's performing well. Liverpool is as well. And you can expect to see this ripple. So Leeds and Sheffield and places like that, they're all going to be the beneficiaries of this, both directly with the effect that we're talking about and also indirectly with all this piling into Manchester, and then therefore the effect of the demand and the price growth and everything else rippling out to surrounding cities that are relatively well connected. Not as well connected as they should be, but that's another story. So you're seeing this in Manchester now, you're seeing it a little bit in Liverpool now, you're going to start seeing this in other cities, and you're going to start seeing it in sort of the secondary areas, like the suburbs and the satellite areas as well. Just like in London, the effect starts out strongest in one place and it spreads out to the surrounding area. And this is where doing what we do really comes into its own, because it's all very well to say, oh yeah, in theory, this is going to happen, and that's going to happen, it's going to ripple and blah, blah, blah. But we're seeing it. And Rob, you are seeing this with what you do every single day.
This is what sparked it all off. Recently, I found it really, really challenging to work with developers to get deals. Now, it's not because the company I run is not a good company. They generally come to us first if they know about us because we've got great relationships. But what started to happen is these developers in Manchester, in Liverpool, in Sheffield and Leeds started to take their developments straight overseas and not even bothering with the UK market. Because before, to get off-plan sales, particularly as it's just launched, they would have to offer a discount to get investors enticed into the deal. They can go to the Far East and sell for full price straight off the bat and in weeks. It's not going to take them a year to sell a whole development out. They're doing it in weeks. And that is very, very appealing to these developers. Now, this isn't just one or two developers. As you can imagine, the word gets around amongst them once this starts to happen. And the majority of developments in Manchester city centre right now are going straight to the Far East, and the UK is being bypassed as a sales market. The only way we're getting in the door and getting a discount with them is to say, well, de-risk yourself by taking some UK investors on. And we are working very hard to do that. But I promise you, it's been the hardest it's ever been to source good deals. It's easy to source any old deal, but to source a good deal, it's really hard. And we do it, and we will, because we've built strong relationships up. But the point is, it's not that I have to work hard. The point is, the UK is just being bypassed. And all those developments you see going up in Manchester, but without any adverts, there's a reason why for that. Because they don't need you.
Okay, so you noticed this first from what you were out there doing, all the conversations you're having. Having noticed it, we then went and dug in a little bit, and we found some data to prove that it wasn't just you. So coming up, we've got two real kind of fall off your chair kind of stats. So fall off your chair stat number one. This is a quote. An investigation by the Times has found that foreign investors are buying up chunks of new housing across Britain, making it even harder for young people to purchase their first home. It found 93% of flats in one of Manchester's biggest housing developments have been bought by foreign residents or companies registered overseas. Only 17 of the 282 flats were bought by British residents, and only 2 are being lived in by UK owners. Wow.
And you go back to that news story that we took from the Manchester Evening News before, and that was an owner-occupier who just couldn't get on the property market. Desperate to, but couldn't. And you can see why now. And that's the thing we're trying to do here. We're trying to piece together all the news stories and our direct experiences so you can see what's happening. But if you think, okay, well, that's just one development. Fair enough. Listen to this from the BBC. Research from property investment firm JLL indicates that Asian investors accounted for 28% of the transactions in the UK property market in 2016. I'll repeat that. 28% of the transactions in the UK property market last year were from the Far East, and up from 17% the year before. If it wasn't in the BBC, you know, if it was on some blog or some post on a forum, you wouldn't believe it, would you? But this is from the BBC website. Unfortunately, it's as we record this, it's only just out. That is mind-blowing. Remember, they're not buying in Skegness. They're not buying in villages. They're buying in UK cities. So in UK cities, that percentage will be even higher. Now, we're going to talk about the impact of this shortly. But as you can imagine, it's having a huge impact.
Yeah, I feel we should have a moment to pause while you pick your jaw up off the floor, but instead we won't. There's more. There's also the impact of what they call PRS, private rented sector schemes. That's another word for build to rent, which you might have heard of. So this is blocks that are being built specifically for rent by pension funds. So pension funds have realised that property is a pretty solid investment. It throws up a consistent income stream that tends to rise with inflation. Perfect for pensions. I'm surprised I didn't really notice that one sooner. But as a result, they are throwing up blocks all over the place that are never going to be owned by an owner-occupier or even by an individual investor. They're only ever going to be rented out for the rental income that's going to go back to the pension fund. If you Google PRS, then any city, so Manchester, Liverpool, take your pick, then you will find absolutely loads of results about new schemes that are being built, being approved, being talked about, all that kind of thing. Why does this matter? Well, we've got a bit of a supply and demand imbalance. This looks like, when you see all these blocks going up, that it's addressing the supply side in terms of places for first-time buyers to perhaps to get on the housing ladder or something like that. It isn't. These blocks are never going to be owner-occupied. So in that respect, they're not adding to supply for that type of market. What it is doing is adding to supply on the rental side. So what this means is that in very central locations, professional builders are going to be putting up blocks that are specifically designed to cater to mainly young professionals, probably going to be wanting to occupy these. And the facilities are going to be very good. It's going to be extremely convenient. The location's going to be great. So that's going to have a real impact on the less good privately owned stock that's out there. So if you've got a bit of a shabby flat in a less good location, chances are that's going to struggle as some of these schemes come online. is very similar to what happened in the student sector. So you had people who were owning these sort of big drafty student houses on the edges of town, had them for like 20 odd years, didn't really invest in them, didn't care because students would turn up and rent them every year anyway. Then they came along and built all the really nice student blocks in the middle of town that were better located, had better facilities. Yes, they were higher priced, but students these days were happy to pay for them. And therefore, suddenly the worst of the existing student stock really started to struggle. This looks to me like exactly the same thing happening again, but not in the student sector, in the standard rental market.
Which you could argue is a good thing. And I actually think it is a good thing because it means that landlords have to up their game and offer better quality accommodation. And if you do already, relax. But it's the landlords who have those properties that, as Rob said, aren't in the best nick. They're the ones who are going to struggle. But the whole point of this is, when I was up high at the Manchester skyline recently looking across, and you see new builds going up. Someone driving through would go, oh, oversupply. Now you look at that skyline and you say, undersupply. None of it is going to the UK, or very little of it is going to the UK market. That makes me feel a lot of things. It definitely sets off emotion in me. It's exciting, it's scary, but it's happening. So when you combine what's happening with PRS and you combine with the residential blocks going overseas, it's going to massively exaggerate the supply and demand issue we have. Because you go back to poor old Bryn from Manchester, who was trying to buy a property, an owner-occupier. We have supply and demand issues in the UK without PRS and without properties going overseas. We have it. We need to build 250,000 new homes just for our own residents. But if the properties that are being built aren't going to people in the UK, then what's that going to do? It's tell you what it's going to do. It's going to create a property boom. But what's interesting is we've seen this before. Now, podcast listeners, you'll probably listen to this go, but everyone knows about Manchester. I can assure you nobody knows about Manchester because we've talked about it for a long time. We talked about it before it happened. We talked about it when it was just happening. And now it's finally getting the headlines we predicted. You'd think everybody knows. But the headlines have just started. And the headlines started in London as well. The growth was there. The headlines were there, but the UK buyers weren't. UK buyers are slow. They were slow last time with London and they'll be slow this time with the North. They won't get on board until 2 or 3, 4 years' time when the market's been booming for a while. They exacerbate the problem because more people are trying to buy stock that just isn't there and the boom continues forward. And of course, as Rob said, this isn't just exclusive to Manchester. This is going to ripple out to other cities as well, but this is where it's starting. So, secret's out the bag, at least for you. You know what's happening now. You know what's going to happen too. Exciting, scary, I'll let you choose your emotion. A boom is on its way whether you like it or not because the supply isn't there for UK owner-occupiers and investors and the demand is there for UK owner-occupiers, not yet from investors, but that once that kicks in as well, you can see what's going to happen.
So there you go. What do you make of that? Let us know. Get over to the show notes, which are at thepropertyhub.net/secretpropertyboom. And there you'll find the links to what we've just been talking about. And get over to the Property Hub forum. Let us know what you think. Is this as meaningful as we suggest? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? How does it make you feel? Let us know. Go over to the forum and discuss it. This is a topic you probably haven't heard much about before. Give it a year, you'll probably start hearing about it in the media here and there, but remember where you heard it first. And I'm sure this is something that we will keep coming back to over the next couple of years as we start to see the effects become more and more exaggerated.
This is one of those episodes that we'd ask you to share because we do the podcast to help people. If more people understand what's happening, then more people can decide what they do with the information. You can choose to be punished or take advantage of it. It's up to you. But at least people have the information. So share it. If you don't know anybody who'd listen, then if you could leave us a nice review, that helps get the word out as well. But let people know about this type of stuff because the more people know, then the better position they are. You know, the power of education makes people better investors. You know, the more well-informed you are, the better investor you'll be. So congratulations to you to listening to this already, but get it out there, spread the word, let people know about what's happening. Not just with this, but with property in general, you know, the 18-year property cycle, all the stuff we've done in the past. But share it, let people know. And if you don't know anybody, well, don't worry, get along to Meetup. You can meet people there. But after that, leave us a review because that helps people find it too. But of course, we don't want to just leave the value there, Rob. We want to give even more. And we will give you that value in the form of a resource of the week. But first, I think it's time for us to get a hard-earned review, Rob. And this week, from iTunes, who's got a wonderful name called Boring 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10. I hope that isn't about the podcast. Let's read on and see. But it's left us 5 stars, and Boring says, good honest comment on the use of property as a pension. Glad you pointed out that it was not for everybody or a magic wand. Like anything, it can provide diversification to an income portfolio. Thank you very much. And also we've got Gree22. I'm a pseudo-experienced property investor with only a handful of properties. Rob and Rob's straight talking and pragmatic advice give me the knowledge and confidence to begin expanding. This is a fantastic podcast. I'm amazed it's still free. Well, you left that in September 2016. Now we're well into 2017 and it will remain free. But thank you anyway for your nice reviews.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. Now, as promised, just before we wrap up, there's just time for a little bit more value. We'll let you know what's coming up next week as well, because that's going to be another fun one. But first, Rob, a resource of the week. You've dug this one out. It's called A Company.
It is. Now, full disclosure, I've not used it, and I'm not sure if I will, because I'm not sure how it suits me. But don't let that put you off, because it's really, really interesting. So this is one for people who have meetings, a lot of meetings. Actually, I probably should look at this. So what it does is you have this app and you put your email address of the people who you're meeting for your calendar. But this app then goes and researches those people for you. So before your meeting, you've got all information dragged from the internet about this individual, so you can hold a better meeting with them, understand their likes, dislikes. Sounds a little bit creepy, but the information's out there publicly anyway. This is just grabbing it all from one place. It's in beta mode at the moment. There's no talk of pricing. They're not going to do it for free, but it looks really interesting. And I must admit, the app looks quite smart too. So I might check it out after all. But if that sounds like something that you would want, go along to the show notes this week, which is thepropertyhub.net/secret property boom. You can get all the links that we talked about today, and there's a fair few, so you probably want to read those. And of course, this resource too.
You had me at creepy, Rob. That sounds great. I'll be checking it out. All right, so that is it for this week. Thank you for joining us. Next week, I know what the episode's about, Rob. I don't know how to describe it. We've got a working title, but I'm not sure I can read it out.
Yeah. Your problems are challenging. Let's go with that. You can guess what was on our show notes. But next week, we're going to look at problems, challenges that you have. Are they worth worrying about? Particularly in property, of course, we're relating this to. It's going to be one of those episodes that I think will get people thinking. And when we kind of stray away from property a little bit, and we're talking about the mindset stuff, they're normally really popular episodes. So make sure you join us for that one. That'll be next Thursday morning. That'll go live. I'm sure you'll make sure you get hold of that. And of course, we've got Ask Rob and Rob back on Tuesday.
Yes, of course we have. So we very much look forward to seeing you for those. Until then, though, have a great day and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to The Property Podcast. For show notes, all our past episodes, and to leave a review, go to thepropertyhub.net/podcast.